Welcome to One Room at a Time. I'm your host, Atticus LeBlanc, founder and CEO of PadSplit, the country's largest co-living marketplace. I've spent more than 2 decades in affordable housing as a property owner, developer, and now an entrepreneur. This show brings together some of the brightest minds in housing to talk about how we can create real solutions to solve the housing crisis. Joining me today is Beth Silverman, co-founder and executive director of the Lotus Campaign. Beth works across social impact, urban planning, real estate development, and public policy. Before launching Lotus, she held leadership roles at the Urban Land Institute and the New York City Economic Development Corporation, where she worked on mixed income housing, public space, and equitable redevelopment initiatives. Beth brings together a rare combination of policy expertise and practical execution, and Lotus Campaign reflects that in how it directly tackles homelessness. Beth, welcome to the show. Where are we catching you?
Thanks for having me. I am in my very warm office in Asheville, North Carolina, where we just got spared from the hurricane or winter storm Fern.
I only figured out there was actually a named storm yesterday, but all my kids are out of school. Everybody's iced in theory, here in Atlanta. Although it's a beautiful day outside, but yeah, the rest of the country seems to be, at least most of us, pretty well shut down. But glad we could at least keep the podcast going.
Yeah, definitely.
So you've worked across the private sector, public sector, nonprofit world. First of all, obviously you landed in nonprofit, so I assume that's your favorite. But maybe let's start there first and foremost.
Well, I would say I had this non-traditional path. I studied city planning. I was totally idealistic, maybe a little naive, that sort of the intersections between neighborhoods, buildings, and community were seamless. And then I learned, oh, wow, they're actually not. There's a lot to do in these spaces. So I wanted to really get experience in every sector, private sector, public sector, and sort of the nonprofit sector was actually maybe by accident.
Okay.
So, the thing though that's interesting is that the root of every role I've had professionally, housing was always a foundational piece, whether it was how to get the development community in New York during the Great Recession to build anything when banks weren't lending. And the city had a lot of financial tools to help bridge gaps, or at ULI when I was traveling all over the country and every community thought they were the only ones with a housing issue. And turns out that was the common ground between most places. So.
And you still didn't answer, by the way, which one was your favorite?
I'm
not gonna let you just weasel out of this one, Beth.
I think it doesn't matter. I think it more matters what's the mission alignment and who are the people you get to co-create great things with. And if that's lined up, then that's where I want to be.
Yes.
That's what I've learned from my career.
Yeah.
So.
No, double click on that for sure. And I think it's just important for people to hear that think, oh, only private sector, only government solutions, or only nonprofit. And couldn't agree more on just the alignment of good people, good mission, and just go get stuff done. And so, yeah, would love for you to just walk our listeners through your experience overall and how it shaped the way you think about housing and homelessness today, and maybe what specifically led you to where you are with Lotus right now.
Yeah, I kept seeing housing show up over and over again in my work, and I wasn't asking for it to show up, right? So I was traveling all over the US to places like Naples, Florida, or Norman, Oklahoma, or Los Angeles, and the same issues around workforce housing and rising levels of homelessness were this shared common ground. And I put that in the parking lot like, oh, I think there's something there. And throughout my career, housing is just the key to everything. You want community vibrancy, it's related to housing. You want sort of, strong diversity of sort of who's in your city, businesses, et cetera, depends on diversity of choice in housing. So I started thinking about that, and I was on the road a lot for ULI because I was running essentially an in-house community consulting arm. And I met 2 of my 3 other co-founders. They were volunteers with my program. We did this panel in Colorado after the flooding events of 2016. And something that stood out in Estes Park, Colorado, is they had to spend insane amounts of money flying in first responders because there was no affordable housing for people that actually worked in the community. And that was one of the sort of early starts of Lotus. Another one was when I opted out of participating on this project that was looking at homelessness and real estate in LA. And you can probably guess why I opted out. I thought it was going to be super political and a big fight. But I recommended my now chairman and co-founder to go on that project. And he came back and started calling me once a week because he was like, this is insane. No one from the private sector was part of the discussion. Why are we building, subsidized units of housing for $750,000, which context, this was 2017, so it's probably
Even higher now.
much higher now. And it led to this aha moment of like, we're not inviting the right people to the party, or we're not inviting everyone to the party to come up with solutions. But then I also think a lot about my own family history. And when my great-grandparents immigrated to this country, it wasn't that they were better at, landing in a community. It's that they had a network of support when they got to this country. And that was the difference between them making it. And I think so often when we see people experiencing homelessness or on the edge of experiencing homelessness, it's that having a network of support or not that really matters. And when that's absent in a community, we see all these things that just are like a domino effect of community health and vibrancy. So, there's some sort of personal just connection to these issues. And I think we all have people in our lives that if they didn't have support, they would find themselves in dire straits. And so sort of marrying my interest in real estate, my interest in policy, my interest in like what is actually social impact and how can I roll up my sleeves and actually do something is a little bit of how Lotus came to be. And then frankly, I didn't know enough about what I was jumping off a ledge and getting into to think too hard about it.
And so you went straight from the Urban Land Institute, ULI, which for our listeners who don't know is kind of this national nonprofit association of all sorts of folks in the architecture, land planning, development world. But you went from ULI right to Lotus, is that right?
Yeah, although I spent 6 months before we officially started Lotus working with my 3 co-founders, fleshing out ideas like what could this be? How can we beta test it? Before deciding I would take that leap and become our one and only full-time employee.
Sure. Well, and so help us understand. So what is Lotus? Give us a broad overview of what the Lotus campaign entails. How is it different? Who do you serve specifically? And like quick caveat. I know we've talked about this a lot on the podcast, but housing and homelessness go together, which is not necessarily obvious for everyone. But yeah, would love to just kind of hear an overview of what you're working on.
Yeah. So, high level, Lotus is all about partnerships of unexpected allies. So that means partners in the private real estate sector and partners in the nonprofit social service space who don't often come together to create solutions. But if you think about, okay, what do we need to solve something that's both a real estate and a social issue? We need the experts in both of those sectors to be building solutions. So what we are really looking at is how do you unlock safe, stable housing that's market rate in mixed income communities by bringing these 2 groups together. So we have something called a landlord participation program, which brings together social service organizations and landlords and developers to open up doors. So it's not too dissimilar from what you do, just a different approach. And what we do at Lotus is we provide all the economic and financial guarantees to minimize a landlord's risk to renting to someone who would not normally qualify. Because if you're someone coming from an unstable housing background, you likely have poor credit, a spotty housing history, you may or may not have employee. employment. And then we also help our social service partners who have clients that are in need of that next step in housing have a choice of where they're helping house their clients. And what we do is we raise this money largely from philanthropy, and we take a classic approach that the real estate sector uses all the time, leverage. So we leverage philanthropic dollars and we use it to de-risk housing people that would not normally have choice in getting into market rate housing. And a big part of what we do, and this is really close to my heart, is we look for partners in neighborhoods with strong opportunity structures, or, a really jargony way that a Harvard professor made famous is neighborhoods of opportunity. So where's their transit? Where are their mixed income housing communities? Where's their neighborhood retail, grocery stores, schools, proximity to employment? Ideally, what are those factors that help people rebuild their lives once they're housed? So that's who we partner with. And we are mostly serving individuals and families that are either experiencing homelessness or right on the edge. And you probably know the stats, and maybe some of your listeners do. Most of this country is 1 or 2 paychecks away from falling into homelessness. And we think it's a win-win-win because we're giving landlords a way to be part of the solution without jeopardizing sort of the economics of their business. And we're amplifying the impact of our social service partners. So to give you an example there, in Charlotte, we've been partnering with an organization called Charlotte Rescue Mission for 2 years. Great organization. In those 2 years, we've facilitated housing for 14 of their clients, and 6 of those have gone on to sign their own leases after just 2 years of support. And then, the other thing that is a big deal is we're increasing that availability of housing for a segment of the population that just typically doesn't have access and cannot wait for this country building enough housing, right, to take care of some of those supply and demand issues.
Love it. And so, I mean, it sounds like you all are similar to almost a housing voucher program that's run publicly. Is that a fair estimate or not?
Yes and no. I think we help amplify that system really well. I mean, some challenges with housing vouchers are a lot of landlords, owner-operators don't want to take them because of perceived challenges that they might find with the voucher system or even just the administrative burden of administering them. But what we're doing is we are using our own dollars to take away the risk. So yes, like a voucher system. But a big part of what we're doing, which I know sounds small, but this is actually where a lot of the work goes, is code switching and language translation. We're doing a lot of case management between property managers and social service case managers. So getting those two to see each other as business partners. And that's, that's a tall order. These are 2 sectors that for the most part, rightly or wrongly, have been taught that the other one doesn't want to help their cause, right? So we're combating that. And we're also trying to do some education and myth busting along the way. I mean, there are just a ton of narratives out there that are completely false about drivers of homelessness, who's homeless and why, the role of the private sector, things like that. But yes, we are a tool that gets rid of all the roadblocks on someone's path to safe, stable housing.
And so you talk about the risks and the risks that landlords or property owners generally are afraid of, whether it is a voucher program or the risks that you all help overcome. When you have those conversations with those landlords, and listen, we obviously do a lot of this in our daily work as well, but I'm curious to know from your perspective, what do you hear directly from them? And there's a mindset I think I've heard a number of times in the policy space about, well, landlords just don't want to rent to use Section 8 vouchers or housing choice vouchers because they're being racist or something else. What have you heard in terms of why those landlords have been historically averse to risks of something like a voucher program, and why they might favor something like the Lotus campaign?
Great question. So, some Lotus history. Before we launched, we actually spoke to probably 100 different colleagues across the country, property management, owners, investment funds, um, landlords, social service partners, and we wanted to ask a very basic question. Why not?
Sure.
So, to landlords, why not? Why wouldn't you participate in a program like this? And what was wild is literally the list of objections were pretty much identical. Who's going to pay my rent? What happens if something goes wrong? My property managers are not social workers. Um, is there going to be someone available if I need to call? I tried this program. It didn't work before, meaning, a program with a local nonprofit or a voucher program. And so we really formed the basis of Lotus's landlord participation program around, can we turn all those objections into benefits of the program? And my feeling is that if you give people an easy way to be part of the solution, they will be part of the solution. But I think there's a deep um, misunderstanding of all of the economic risks involved in real estate. And if you're a landlord, if someone doesn't pay rent, if multiple people don't pay rent, how are you paying your bills or
Sure.
paying back the investors that funded the whole project to begin with? And so, we really get at that risk mitigation, and we're humans, right? There's not info at, right, email address or like a number with no name. And the idea is to really strengthen the relationships between landlords and property managers and case managers. And I think I wish the voucher program did that. I'm not sure
Yeah.
it does that.
Well, what I've found in talking to housing providers and landlords is that uh, we spend a lot of time on the risk mitigation for financial consequences, and that's probably the biggest. But what I hear almost just as often is that it's not just about the financial side, and it is a lot emotional, right? And you can say humans are predictably irrational, per author Dan Ariely, but also at the same time, uh, maybe protecting their own emotions to some degree, because some of these situations can be really uncomfortable, I guess is maybe the best way to say it, which ties into, I assume, how you work with a lot of the caseworkers and case managers that you deal with. And so talk a little bit about the other risks and how those are mitigated, because, and I'll give a quick example. When someone is screaming in an apartment complex at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you are the property owner or property manager of the property, there's no playbook of what to do necessarily, even though the person may just be having a nervous breakdown. But like, how do you work through those situations and overcome those objections when you are talking about whether it's a mental health issue or I mean, could be anything, and whether it's a founded fear or an unfounded fear? Like, how do you overcome some of those objections, and then how do you execute against it?
Great question. We don't partner with everyone. So we have selection criteria and a very, very, very simple application process, one page for our nonprofit partners. But the biggest criteria we're looking for is the strength of ongoing support and services once someone's housed. So that is sort of a really key thing for us. If that's not there, then we can have a partnership. But we also rely on our nonprofit partners to vet and identify who's ready for housing. Who is ready for a lease, not just who's ready for housing. And
Sure,
there's a
sure.
distinction there. And I think some of what we're seeing sort of in national political discussion is going after this lack of understanding of housing ready versus lease ready. And so we're really focused on that.
Yeah.
We want to get everyone housed, but there's a difference between having your name on a lease and wanting to be housed. So we're working really closely, and we're actually adding this into all of our trainings with our nonprofit partners, is a lease-ready sort of training for case managers who are learning a lot about real estate by partnering with us. So that's one way. And, I think it's treating landlords and real estate partners as business partners. And I think when you start from that place versus you should do this, it's a really different conversation. So we really take an economic approach, both to designing our program, but also how do we create partnerships with the real estate sector? How do we have those opening conversations? What is our investment pitch to them about why they should partner with us? And I think that really distinguishes us from other organizations or sort of groups that have tried bits and pieces of risk mitigation light, right? And I think, again, when you start a conversation looking at someone as a business partner, it's a really different type of conversation, and honestly, acknowledging their fears, whether they're grounded in reality or not, goes a long way.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it is, I will say my favorite nonprofit partners are the ones who recognize there's more than a guilt trip here. We understand that you are an important part of the equation, and your sentiments are real and sometimes grounded well, sometimes not, but here's the reality. And then I'd say the other part of that, which you didn't really touch on, but I imagine has to be true given the length of time that you guys have been around, is just you have to execute. And so talk to us a little bit about the execution side of this, and whether it is repeat users or how you guys have expanded, like, or even just testimonials from some of those partners, because I hear a lot of pitches from whether it's nonprofit or others who sell a great game, and to your point around the case managers that you were talking about, you vet, like they just don't have the ongoing capacity to support the development or the operations on a continual basis. So talk a little bit about the execution side.
So we started as a team of one. We are no longer that, which I'm grateful for. And we started in Charlotte, North Carolina. We had 3 partners from the real estate side, and we had 3 partners from the nonprofit side. And that first year, I pretty much was knocking on doors. I mean, I really leveraged my ULI network, my professional network, but if someone turned me down by email, I somehow got them to have coffee with me. But we started in Charlotte, and we quickly went from maybe housing like 50 people that first year to doubling that the next year. And that was because we demonstrated a proof of concept and had some early impact. And we had some great early nonprofit partners that helped me build the plane while I was also flying it. And, today in Charlotte, we have 20 different partners. That's more than 50 different residential communities. We have housed in Charlotte nearly 600 individuals. We've had, on average, a success rate of anywhere from 91 to 95%, which means people staying in housing after their initial lease, which is super important because nationally, the number of people experiencing homelessness within their first year of housing, 25% return to homelessness. So we're really proud of that. I had to work really hard to get our community of champions and stakeholders to understand the importance of renewals. I thought renewals were a real good metric of how well our model is working. But today we're also in Raleigh. We've been there 2 years, and it took us half the time in Raleigh to have the same level of impact that we did in Charlotte. And that's because we built on, a lot of hard labor in Charlotte and lessons learned. But so we are now approaching over 800 people that we've opened up housing for. We've got nearly 40 partners across both markets. And what we're finding is that the majority of individuals and families need about 2 years of support through a Lotus, and then they're able to qualify for a lease on their own, which is awesome.
And is your support, is that totally privately funded at this point, or do you guys get city
Ye-
agency support as well, or?
Well, for the most part, it's philanthropic dollars. We have a little bit of earned revenue and investment income through some very small impact investment that we do in multifamily. But we early on, and it wasn't because I'm a genius, I said we're not going to take public dollars because the burden in terms of admin to them of going after that money when
Sure.
we were so small, it just didn't make sense. And then as we went along, the thinking is, well, that those local dollars should really go to our nonprofit partners. Let's see if we can leverage sort of some corporate dollars from the real estate sector and beyond. So we don't take public dollars. Not that we wouldn't ever, but so
Sure.
far,
But it's allowed you to remain lean and
nimble.
agile, and yeah. No,
And spend money on things like a damage and reserve fund, which is a little trickier
sure.
if it's
Sure.
public dollars and the damage or loss of rent hasn't occurred yet. So
Yeah, no question. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess where are you now in terms of scale? Where do you want to go? And then what do you think the public should know? I mean, any misconceptions about what you guys are doing or just homelessness in general that you think our audience should know as you think about the future?
yeah, so we want to definitely continue to expand our work in Charlotte and Raleigh. And right now we're also focusing on where we go next outside of North Carolina. And you might appreciate this with PadSplit. When we first started, the commentary was, well, that's only going to work in Charlotte.
Mm,
And then once we expanded to
sure.
Raleigh, it's that only works in North
We
Carolina.
st- we
So
still we still hear that, and we're in like 32 markets. Yeah.
yeah, so we want to go to our next market outside of North Carolina and take all the lessons learned. We want to do a little bit more on the investment side of doing, some very limited investment in multifamily, mostly preservation of workforce. So we are a minor investor in a property in Charlotte called Sharon Crossing, which is really awesome, sets aside 20%
That's
of the
really cool.
units for our mission, and it's totally market rate. And it's on its 8th year. We just recapitalized it with a new partner, and now we have the first right of refusal at the end of the investment term, which is great. In terms of stuff this audience should know, I love this question. So there are just so many myths out there. And, when you're working in this space, you're like, man, how are these myths just like ever present everywhere? So we've actually built this into our social media and our newsletter because I'm like, all right, well, if we're going to do this work, we got to educate people too, but we got to do it in a way that doesn't make people feel bad about sort of what they've heard and known. So, one thing is that homelessness is caused by individual poor choices. That is a big one. And I would just say most people, and we all know them because they are friends or they are family members, are 1 or 2 paychecks away from a crisis. And it's not that hard for a quick turn of the dial for any of one of us to be in a really precarious social and economic place. So we, this past year, had a big fundraising gala, and we had Dr. Greg Colburn, who wrote the book, Homelessness is a Housing Problem, did a great job educating the audience, and we actually created a trivia game that was all these myths
Oh,
and
fun.
facts from his book and then also our work. What was really incredible and pulls at your heartstrings a little bit, we did this event in Charlotte and Raleigh. At both events, one member of the catering staff came up to us and said, I'm who you're talking about. And one
Yeah.
woman, mother of 3, 4 jobs. Her mother was watching the kids while she was working our event. What was really awesome is we were able to connect her that night to one of our partners who was in the room.
Oh, it's amazing.
But we have built myth busting into so much of our work and trying to equip people that either donate to us or our partners with just fuel to have game-changing conversations. And I think these really tough, sticky social and economic issues, we don't want to engage in them and we don't know how. And so I'm always trying to look for ways of how do we bring curiosity to these conversations and educate everyone that's like in our greater community about it.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that you were able to connect with folks at your events and identify them and then get them support. But pretty much every conference I go to, it's always at some hotel or event center, and there are always people serving, either passing glasses of wine or hors d'oeuvres or just fixing the buffet table or something for the event. And anytime I have an opportunity to present, I said, look, the people that we serve, like I can guarantee you they are in this room right now, and that you will run into someone today who is struggling with homelessness. And I'm not sure that they ever believe me, but I mean, you know that it's true because I know I've heard it literally thousands of times at this stage of the game. So I really appreciate all the work that you're doing and the fact that you're able to make those lines of connection for the folks who are in your audience, but then also really support the people who are most in need as well. But Beth, great place to pause there before we jump in for round two. Thanks so much for the work that you're doing and for bringing such clarity to a space that often feels just so overwhelming. Lotus Campaign is a reminder that progress doesn't always come from complexity. It just takes a lot of focus. And for our listeners, you can learn more about Beth's work at lotuscampaign.org. We'll link this in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, or suggest a future guest. And we will catch up with Beth again for part 2. But for now, thank you for tuning in to One Room at a Time.